what I wanted to talk about today is a couple of statements, a couple of things to think about. First of all, Thales. I can't see a lot with the lights on there. How many people have heard about our company? That's like half of the audience. How many resellers or integrators are in the audience today? I would expect that's the majority of the people. So there must be a lot of end customers as well here. Yeah? It's quite a big mix. Okay. So Thales is a large French defense industrial company. We are involved in aerospace, airplanes, you name it, a lot of different things. We're not going to talk about those, but I do want to point out a few things that you may not know. I mean, you all have a cell phone. In that cell phone, there's a SIM card or an eSIM. We make those. We all have bank cards or applications on our smartphones to pay. We're also producing those solutions. And we all have passports when we travel or identity cards. Well, everyone here, as long as you're Belgian, your identity card and your passport is also made by us. So you may not know the name, but you're actually using quite a lot of the stuff on a daily basis. I thought it was interesting to know. So we're still struggling, it seems. So I'm just going to have a peek there. Right. So what do we do in Thales in the division called Cloud Protection and Licensing? I'm not going to do a sales pitch, but I'm just going to give you some ideas, some overview of what we do. So we believe that, we believe because there are reports like Verizon publishes a data report every year, and they show that 70% of the hacks that actually happen are the result of the theft of credentials. So one of the things we focus on is making sure that customers can protect the identity of their users. That could be employees, that could be external people. So authentication, access management is one of the key things we do. And we see, and this is interesting, that even today a company that has deployed a multi-factor authentication solution, they very often only do it for a VPN or a remote desktop application. So just people that are mobile. But I think today we're all mobile, so there are still quite a lot of unprotected users out there. And we've seen in one of the recent data breaches, hacks in the US, that you heard that there was this oil disruption in the US on the East Coast. It wasn't because of the lack of lorry drivers, but it was because some hackers actually put the whole system down, and they they actually managed to do that by hacking into a company, a very small supplier, that hadn't had that person protected his identity. So they had deployed MFA for everyone else, but not for a limited number of users, and that's how they got in. So they will always find the path of least resistance in the end. So that's the one thing, so protect identities. Now you've heard the term, I don't know who invented it, but I mean we've used it quite a lot in our company. Maybe it even comes from Peter, data is the new oil, and it's been around for a while. Data is what you can monetize. So on the other hand, we also focus a lot on protecting data. Now, in today's world, it used to be 10, 20 years ago, it used to be very simple to know where data sat. It was somewhere, it was on a network, it was on your laptop, but today data is everywhere. And I had a very beautiful slide to demonstrate that, but I'll just try and explain it in a different way then, because it's not working. Sorry, marketing department, for all the effort you put into the slide production here, but we'll get there. So I'm actually as old as Peter. So born in '69, and when I was a young child, I used to watch television, and one of the famous series I remember is Barba Papa. Who remembers Barba Papa, right? So Barba Papa is this family of creatures, and they move in all different ways, and they become bigger and smaller. And it's actually a bit the same for data today. Data sits everywhere. You can't really control the perimeter. So and one of the things that, and I'm actually scratching my head what I'm saying that we scratch our head about, is why people, companies keep investing in a lot of traditional security solutions. And just to make it very clear, we are not against VPNs or firewalls or anything, but we heard the concept layered security. Is it working now?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Oh, the side screens are, yes. So this is all we covered already. Right, so this is where we are at this point. So I think I lost my fil rouge now. Yeah, Barba Papa. So data is everywhere, and especially with the proliferation of cloud and all these things, we see that it is very difficult to control. But we see that a lot of companies still invest only in those kind of solutions. Now, to help customers to understand where data sits, we've developed some capabilities around that. To do data discovery, because it's very difficult, first of all, which data is sensitive, but also where does it sit in your organization or outside your organization. So we have some tools to help you find that. Then we use, we allow our customers to use one of the oldest security technologies used by the Chinese, encryption. It's still there, it's still around, and it's still very efficient. And obviously, encrypting data is not the be-all and end-all. I always compare it to if you're in a hotel, you got your key, but there is a master key, right? If you leave that master key somewhere at the reception, and the guy managing the reception or the lady managing the reception just went to the bathroom, you can take the master key and you get access to all the data. So that is the set of solutions that we try to cover within our business line within Thales. So just to give you a bit of an overview, because I know we're not a household name like Fortinet or IBM. Thales is a bit of an outlier, I would say, in cybersecurity space. And maybe names like SafeNet, Gemalto, Aladdin, CryptoCard ring more bells. Well, that's all us. So I want to welcome back on stage Peter Hinson. And actually, Peter, when you mentioned this thing about Hawaii, I sat in my German-built car like a few months ago, driving in Germany, and I was talking to my wife, and all of a sudden I get this message, and I thought it was like, a ghost rider, and it said, Luchtaanval. And I was like, so that must have been someone who pushed the wrong button there as well. It was very scary, I can tell you that. So, we talked about the complexity of data, within the organization and the Barba Papa, and I just want to, ask to you, Peter. I mean, you have some, you advise a lot of companies on a daily basis. What's your take on this topic?
Well, I honestly believe that most companies are now only starting to realize how complex the data flows inside their organization are starting to become. Mm-hmm. It's not just the fact that we have more data, we have the complexity of managing large volumes and different silos. And at the same time, what we have is that more and more companies are seeing the reliance on outside data. It's the connectivity of data, it's the flow of data. And I think we've always had difficulty in making sure inside organizations to secure who has access to what data. That's becoming even more complex in that world of ecosystems and platforms. So in my opinion, I think it's not just going to be a role that you have as a security officer, but I think this idea of data flows and managing access and granularity of data flows is going to be one of the most complex and challenging tasks that we have. And I think this is where the CISOs of this world, and I loved Luc's presentation, combined with the CIOs of this world, are probably going to have to reinvent themselves. That's my simple take on what is happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just going to check. Yeah, we talked about cloud a lot, and yeah, it is a bit of a buzzword with C-suite people. Very often, I've had discussions with customers saying, or CISOs actually saying, I got a mandate to deploy a cloud strategy and a cloud security strategy, and as soon as I told them, the board, it was going to cost them 3 million, they said, bin it. Let's not do that. And I know Luc touched upon it a lot this morning. And I think it goes back to the proliferation of data, where it sits. But any advice from you that we haven't heard so far this morning?
I think the cloud is the natural vector going forward. I think it's the idea of everything as a service. But there are two elements to that. One is that I honestly believe that a lot of the, especially big tech cloud vendors, are probably more secure than we are inside our own companies. And the reason is that if you look at, say, an AWS, they have been able to attract the top talent when it comes to security. They have amazing teams dealing with that. The only problem is, if there is a breach in one of them, it's a really, really big breach. I always compare it when you drive to Spain and you have an accident, you run off the road and you fall off a cliff. That's really unfortunate. But if you're in a plane going to Spain and that plane crashes and 250 people get killed, that's headline news all over the world. And I think it's very similar to what happens. I mean, if you have a security breach in your company, that's really bad for you. Tough luck. But if Amazon has one of these, it's going to be headline news. But overall, flying to Spain is still a hell of a lot safer than actually driving your car to Spain. And I think it's that type of analogy that we have to think about. But it is more than just security. It's also about rights. I'll tell you a story that I'm probably not supposed to tell. But one of the strangest things that happened to me a few years ago is I was doing some work for the Dutch government, actually the Dutch military. And we were having an offsite on the future of how they were thinking about the day after tomorrow in the Dutch army. But there was a selection of generals there, and one of them was from the Air Force. And he told the story, over lunch, that the Dutch actually bought into the Joint Strike Fighter, which is a US airplane. And you remember Belgium, we bought F-16s a really long time ago, but when you bought a plane, you got the plane and you ran the plane. Today, these planes come with their own ERP system, and they're all in the cloud. So the generals of the Dutch military went to the US, got a training on the Joint Strike Fighter, and the whole ERP system to completely run the plane is cloud-based. And one of the generals, as a joke, said to the people that were explaining, if we have to upload our targets, that's all cloud-based. Huh? But the targets are in our own ERP system as a service. But what if we want to enter a US target? And they said, that's not possible. And that's really funny because you have a dependency also on these cloud vendors. That is something that we're going to see amazing stories come out.
Yeah, well, actually, it's good that you mention it because we've seen the Dutch government, the French government, EU government. They've all, advised against being too reliant, on one single cloud vendor. And they have these recommendations to say you should not really put the cat with the milk, right? So maybe use your cloud infrastructure from one provider, but make sure you use security solutions that are from a different vendor because you have that lock-in.
Yeah, I agree.
Indeed. And I think.
But that's when geopolitics becomes very real.
Absolutely. And a couple of years ago, this Dutch guy, I forgot his name, who's the CTO or CIO of Amazon Web Services, who said, you had this T-shirt, encrypt your own shit. So, and it actually means, this is the shared responsibility model where we say to customers, you shouldn't. Actually, the cloud provider says to their customers, it's your data at the end of the day because they don't want to be held responsible at the end of the day. It's typical American, right? At the end of the form, you have to put a few dots just to make sure that they can always waive responsibility in the end. So yeah, that's a good one. All right. This is actually a line, I don't think we've copyrighted it, but it was invented by a Danish colleague of mine, inspired by another guy from the UK. But we always tend to think hackers, they break in. And I think, for security resellers here in the room, if you have a conversation with your customers, I think it's a line you can, reuse. We won't ask you any money for it. But, it's just this mindset. Yeah, they got access to these credentials because they're all over. They're on Facebook. If you use 365, probably all those users will be using the same password as they use on Facebook or any other, social media platform they've been using. So, and we heard about how long does it take before we realize they're in. Could be 7 months, could be longer, could be shorter. But any thoughts on this one, Peter?
Well, I love the phrase, and I'm probably going to steal and use it.
I think so, but you're allowed to do so.
But I think you're absolutely right. Credentials are something, I think it's tied with consumerization that we now have, where work and life is no longer separated but blurred. We see so much complexity also coming into our personal lives, and that consumerization actually goes to the fact that we're probably a little bit more lax with credentials. It's not about just the fact that credentials are stolen, but it's so easy now to use the credentials to get in. So I fully understand that, and I honestly believe that with consumerization, this is going to become even more of a challenge and a problem that we have to solve.
Yeah, right. Okay. Who has heard about Schrems in this room? Okay, that's
one,
just
two, three,
just
a few.
A lot of people on the left there, so they're colleagues of mine. So that's funny. Well, Schrems, it's not a it's not a disease or anything. He's not the president of Austria, but he's an Austrian lawyer who actually rose up against Facebook in 2013, and that's when he became known. All these privacy topics.
He's a privacy activist.
Yeah, the privacy activist indeed. And so Schrems 2 is a ruling that was made last year by the European Court of Justice, I think in Luxembourg that must be, where they said, well, we have this old EU-US Privacy Act, that's no longer valid, this Data Shield, I think it was called.
Data Protection Shield.
Yeah, Data Protection Shield.
Yep.
And you need to be aware that if you are putting data outside the EU or outside the US, for both on both sides of the Atlantic, you got to be really mindful of the fact that there is some compliance around that, because there is this concern, and I think it's a warranted concern these days, because going to your sort of joke about what a general said a couple of years ago or last year, we spoke to a general a long time ago, 20 years ago, and this is a story in the company, and he was asked, who are you most afraid of? Or who should we be most afraid of? The Russians, the Chinese? And his answer was, the Americans. Mm-hmm. And that was 20 years ago. So this whole thing about compliance, there is something to be, you want to be best in class and you want to just tick the box, but maybe you want to do something more than just tick the box. Maybe be smart about it and also exploit it, as a commercial, atout, as they say in French, commercial joker or a tool towards your customers. Any comments on compliance, Peter? Because it had been touched on a lot today.
Yeah. So Schrems 2, I think most people don't know it. I think it's only a year old. By the way, do you know what Max Schrems' company is called, or his organization?
No.
NOYB. You know what it stands for? None of your business. Which I think is, he's a really strange guy. I met him once. Mm-hmm. He's a privacy activist. And I do believe that the complexity of what we now have is that most of the big cloud tech players are US players. And the complexity of big European companies massively using things like AWS. Schrems 2 is an attempt to actually do something about that. First of all, I think it's strange that you put GDPR and Schrems 2 on the same slide, because I think they're fundamentally different. I'm not a big fan of GDPR. I think it's one of the worst things that we have done in Europe. And the reason is that if you remember the promise that this is going to be an extreme step up in terms of protecting everyone's privacy, the result is I've never received more spam. I have to click stupid consent forms all the time, and I never read the terms and conditions. So honestly, great ideas, horrible execution. And I think we have to be careful that we don't over-comply, but I do believe it's a fundamental geopolitical thing that we have to take into account. My prediction is that you are going to have more compliance that's going to complicate your life. And you're right, you could see it as an opportunity, but at this moment, I think in Europe, we have to be careful that we don't put too much regulation and flaw in the execution, because in the end, we have to get better, the customer has to get more secure, and I think we have to make sure that we don't over-comply, but I think we should over-focus on execution.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe to answer why did we put GDPR on that slide, I think we've had this event now 9 times, and there's a lot of security events where, 2017, 2018, before GDPR became the real, a valid mandate, it was a G word, right? You could hardly mention it anymore. People were sick of it. Now, we haven't heard about GDPR for quite a while. And the reason I put it on the same slide as Schrems is actually just to make sure for all the security professionals here in the room, and I guess we all are, we can all say we have that label, is make sure you're aware of what it is, because your customers are going to have to deal with it. So make sure you get some education on Schrems, because everyone knows about GDPR. If you know what Schrems is, it gives you a bit of a head start or some advantage over people who don't know. And I've been talking, we had a meeting recently in the Netherlands with a large partner, and we spoke to their CEO, and he didn't know what Schrems was. And I thought, and you were in security, that was a bit worrying. So that's why I put those two words on the same slide. Yeah, we spoke about skills shortage as well. I'm not sure how many, 5 minutes, yeah? How much more we want to say about that. I mean, obviously, we've seen in the US, a lot of companies that have gone to the cloud a lot more quickly than in Europe, because they all started working for Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Apple. But we start to see the same trend. I think it's very difficult these days to find skilled people in security.
There's an absolute war on talent. That war on talent is even more severe in IT, and that war on talent is even more brutal in security. And the reason is security is bloody hard work. You have to be really clever. You have to constantly be on your toes to stay alert. And it's a little bit of a special world. Huh? I mean, I think we need to find a way to get more people excited about the world of security. And that's why I think Luc should actually be mandatory in schools to talk about security. That's, I think, one of the things that we should try and do. But if we're not going to make the job more sexy, and the stories, because the security people can tell amazing stories, but we rarely have a chance to actually get people excited about this. And I think this is not going to happen by itself. We need to proactively do more communication to get people more excited about this amazing profession.
Yeah, and I mean, many people talked about security by design for a long time, but I haven't heard that term for a few years now. Do you still hear it when you...
From time to time,
yeah, but it seems to be
fading away.
Fading away indeed. Okay. Yeah, the shift in work-life balance. I think we touched upon that as well this morning, and with the consumerization, just hinted to it. Yeah, very often, my management says, Dirk, you got to speak more to your customers about the ROI on security investments. And I think it's a tough one, because you can probably only ROI it when the shit has hit the fan. Any thoughts around that?
Well, I love the example that Luc gave about the saying that, if you ask for budget, it's really, really difficult. But if you show that you're maybe going to miss a couple of RFPs because you can't actually show that you are capable of doing business in the way that is expected, that is, I think, a really clear way to show that this has a very high return. And it's not just about waiting for the shit to hit the fan. I think it's about really showing that you could probably do better, more business as a result of this. I think that might be a way to really think about taking some of these ROI concerns away.
Okay, thank you very much. I think these were the main topics I wanted to cover. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Peter, for giving us some food for thought as well. And yeah, see you later.
Thank you.